How was your day? Maybe someone decided who you were before you had a chance to show them. Maybe you carried a grief no one wanted to hear about today. There's a storm god in Japanese mythology who was born already grieving. His father gave him the sea, and he refused. He wanted his mother. His name was Susanoo. Tonight we're going somewhere old. The smell of pine and salt, the creak of a wooden veranda, a river running over pale stones. Settle in, let the storm move past. Here is where the story is heading. A man with a sword stands alone in a valley. 8 enormous heads weave above him. Red eyes. Cedar trees grown on the spine of a serpent. The wind smells of dried blood and wet cedar. 8 wooden vats wait below the platform, full of strong sake. The trap is set. The serpent is coming. But how did a god, banished from heaven, shorn of his beard, sent away in disgrace, end up at the end of a mountain road, ready to do this? That's what the old tellers wanted you to wonder. How a god the heavens called too much could become the one a village in trouble would beg for. It's the question every story like this carries. Maybe you've felt it. The part of you that frightens others. Could it be the part that ends up saving someone? This is what we do here. Every week, one story. One night. Something old, something true, something that still has its hand on your shoulder. Tonight it's Japan. Get comfortable now. Adjust the pillow. Find your warmth. If you drift off before the serpent stirs, the storm god won't mind. He's watched over many sleeping mortals before. This is only the beginning of the story. The part most people never reach, that's still ahead. But not tonight. Tonight, just this. If tonight felt like something, subscribe. We'll be here next week. Another story, another night like this. Now back to ours. Long before the serpent. Before the 8 vats. Before the daughter who became a calm. There was a wide sandbar where a clear river met a calm sea. An older man stood waist deep in that river at dawn. His name was Izanagi. He had just come back from somewhere no one comes back from clean. The land of the dead. Yomi. He had gone to find his wife and lost her again. The river was washing what he carried back from that place off his skin. From the water that washed his left eye, a goddess of light was born. From his right eye, a god of cool moonlight. From the rinsing of his nose, a storm. 3 children of the river, the sun goddess Amaterasu, the moon god Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo, born already weeping, born already wanting his mother. Their father gave each one a realm. To Amaterasu the high sky, to Tsukuyomi the night, to Susanoo the wide sea. He said it kindly. He didn't know yet. Each child climbed to their realm. Amaterasu rose into the high sky and the world warmed. Tsukuyomi crossed into the night, and a soft silver came down on the fields. But Susanoo never went to the sea. He stood on the shore where his sister climbed into the sky, and he wept. He couldn't say what for. Only that it hurt. He wept the way a child weeps for a mother who is not coming back. Because that, in truth, was what he was. The storm god was a grieving child first. Days passed, then weeks. The grief did not soften. It moved into the land itself. The wind began to rise wherever he stood. His beard grew, long, tangled, salt-streaked. The mountains where he passed went bare. The rivers where he drank ran dry. Grief, when it cannot find words, takes the shape of the world. His father heard of it. The trees no one had touched were dying. The fish were leaving the bay. Izanagi came down from where he had been resting and stood before his son. Why, his father asked, not unkindly. I gave you the sea, the whole sea. Why are you weeping like a child who's been left somewhere? Susanoo lifted his face. His eyes were red. I want to go to my mother, he said. She's in the land of the dead. I want to go where she is. His father's face hardened. He had been to that land. He had crawled out of it. He would not let his son go down to find what he had only just escaped. If you cannot rule the sea, his father said, if grief is what you bring instead, then you cannot stay here. Go, you are no son of mine in this realm. Maybe you know that feeling. The look of someone deciding you are too much. The door closing because they can't carry what you're carrying. Susanoo stood up slowly. He looked at the wide sea his father had given him. He looked at the high sky where his sister was. And he made a choice. If he had to leave the realm of his father, he would say goodbye to his sister first. He climbed the high air toward Takamagahara, the plain of high heaven. But the wind that traveled with him was not soft. The mountains shook as he climbed. Storms boiled around his ankles. The kami above heard him coming long before they saw him. His sister felt it before she saw him. The sun of the world stood up in her hall. She set down her loom. She tied back her sleeves. She did not smile. She knew her brother. She loved him in the way you love a younger brother who breaks things. She also knew that grief and a sword look the same when they arrive at your door. She put on armor, a bow across her back, a bundle of arrows at her hip. She wound her hair into a man's high topknot. Then she walked out to meet him. Susanoo arrived in a wind that bent the rice. He saw his sister in armor. He saw the bow. He understood. He raised both hands and said, "I'm not here for war." She didn't lower the bow. "Then prove it," she said. "Prove your heart is clean. We'll make children together. The kind of children we make will tell us who you are." It was the old test. The one between gods. You took something of mine. I took something of yours. We turned them, in our hands, into children. The children spoke for us. She took his Magatama jewels. She bit them, breathed on them, blew them into the air. They became 3 goddesses. Bright, calm, steady. She held them up. "These are yours," she said. He took her sword. He bit it. He breathed on it. He blew the breath into the high air. 5 gods came out, strong, broad-shouldered, shining. He held them up. "These are yours," he said. "I win," Susanoo said. "My breath made gods. Yours made only goddesses. That means my heart is clean." He laughed once, loud, wrong-shaped. The wind picked up. She didn't argue. She knew he had cheated. He had made the children from her sword, not his. But she let it go. She thought, perhaps, the win would be enough. It was not enough. Winning never is, when what you wanted underneath was for someone to see how badly you were hurting, and let you stay anyway. He stayed. No one had said he could. He stayed anyway. He walked the rice paddies of his sister at night. He felt the work of every kami there. None of it touched him. One night the grief he had carried since the river turned in his chest. It didn't soften. It went the other way, it sharpened. It became something he could swing. He kicked open the irrigation banks of his sister's paddies. The careful water spilled across the rice. He filled the careful holes with earth. He laughed once, and there was no joy in it. When dawn came, his sister stood at the broken banks. She did not weep. She didn't lift the bow. She bent and started to fix what had been undone, alone. She told the other kami, "He is hurting." He didn't know what he was doing. Let him stay. That was the last time she said it like that. He broke into her sacred dining hall. He scattered the offerings of new rice. He soiled the wooden floor. He laughed again. The laugh was getting worse. Stay with this. The next part is the part the gods of Japan never quite forgave him for. It changes everything that comes after, even the redemption. His sister had a weaving hall. The cloth made there was the cloth gods wore. Her women sat at their looms in white robes. The shuttles passed back and forth. He had a horse, a heavenly horse dappled sacred. He flayed it. He broke open the roof of the weaving hall. He threw the horse's body down through the hole. One of the weaving women died. The shuttle in her hand stopped. The other women cried out. The cloth on her loom fell still and never moved again. His sister stood in the dark of that hall. She didn't speak. She didn't shout. She turned around and walked back across the high paddies alone. She found a cave at the edge of the high realm. A cave with a stone large as a hill at its mouth. She walked inside. She rolled the stone closed behind her. The world went dark, not the dark of night, the dark of no sun. The rice did not ripen. The flowers did not open. The sea froze where it touched the shore. The kami gathered before the cave. 800 of them. They lit fires, they argued. They tried to call her. The stone did not move. Susanoo stood at the back. No one looked at him. They didn't have to. Everyone there knew which god had emptied the world of its light. He had wanted his mother. He had wanted his sister. He had wanted more than anything for someone to stay. And he had broken every door that was open to him. It's worth pausing here. The kami gathered at that cave were not far away. In the old Japanese way of seeing, gods lived in everything. The rice, the river, the hearth, the pillar. They called these spirits kami. The word doesn't mean God the way other languages mean it. It means more like presence. Something there, something to be respected. A waterfall could be a kami. A grandfather's tools could be a kami. A storm and a storm god were the same word for the people who told this story first. So when Susanoo wept and the rivers dried, that wasn't metaphor. That was him being what he was. The kami of storms cannot grieve quietly. The world feels it. Hold that close as we go on. To these gods, weather and feeling were not separate things. The storm in him and the storm in the sky were the same storm. Back at the cave, the kami had a plan. They were going to coax the sun out. They built a great stage of wood. They hung a bronze mirror in a sacred tree. They strung curved magatama jewels from the branches. They lit a great fire. And then they asked the goddess Aim, no Uzum, to dance. She climbed onto an overturned wooden tub. She danced. She danced wildly. The kami began to laugh. The laughter rolled through the dark like sudden warm thunder. Inside the cave, his sister heard them. The world had been silent for so long. Why were they laughing? She slid the stone open just a finger's width to see. They had hung the bronze mirror so it would catch her light the moment she peeked. She saw it. She saw something glowing back at her. She thought it was another sun. A strong god stood beside the cave. The moment her shoulders cleared the stone, he caught her arm and pulled her gently into the world. The light came back. The stone was rolled back across the cave so she could not return to it. A straw Shimenawa rope was strung above the door. She was held now, gently, in the world. Then the kami turned, all 800 of them, and looked at the back of the crowd. At the storm-haired god who had not moved. The trial began. They didn't kill him. The kami of Japan are not in a hurry to kill what they don't understand. They held a council instead. The council took days. They decided he had to pay. He was fined 1,000 bundles of offerings. His beard was cut. His nails were pulled. He was sent away from the high heaven forever. He didn't argue. He let them shorten him. He let them strip the gold off his sword. He let them take what was sacred to him, piece by piece. He understood, finally, that he had broken something he loved. That he had wanted his sister to throw open her door, and instead he had broken every wall of her house. His sister came to see him before he went. She didn't bring the bow. She didn't bring the mirror. She just stood at the edge of the platform. "I'm sorry," he said. He didn't look up. She didn't answer right away. She watched him a long moment. Then she said, "I know." She did not say, "I forgive you." Forgiveness is not always a word the older sister gives the younger brother. Sometimes it's a look. Sometimes it's the absence of the bow. He stood. He picked up his bronze sword in its sharkskin scabbard. The kami opened a path to the long stair that led down. The stair to the world of mortals. He walked down. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel his sister's light on his shoulders the whole way down. The light didn't come closer. It didn't pull away. That's a kind of forgiveness too. Not bringing you back, but not turning the light off as you go. Maybe you've been given that once. Maybe you've given it. Below him, the world of mortals waited. He didn't know which province he would land in. He didn't know what would be waiting. He just knew the stair was long. He walked for what felt like days. The cloud stair gave way to mountain stone. The mountain stone gave way to forest. The forest gave way to a river running over pale stones. He didn't know its name. The land he had stepped into was Izumo. The river was the eye. He didn't know yet that the next chapter of his life had already begun upstream. He stopped at the river's edge. He set down his sword. He cupped water in his hands. He drank. The water tasted clean, not like the rivers he had dried in heaven. He sat back. He looked up the river. He saw something floating on the current. Small wooden, plain. A single chopstick, not broken, used. A used chopstick on the current meant a household upstream. A household meant a kitchen. A kitchen meant someone was alive up there. He stood and started to walk. That's how stories often begin in this world. Not with thunder, not with prophecy, with one small thing on the surface of the water. A chopstick, a feather, a leaf. He walked for an hour, maybe two. The river bent. The willows leaned closer to the water. He heard a sound through the trees. Quiet, continuous. He had heard it before. It was the sound of weeping. 3 voices, an old man, an old woman, a young girl. They were trying to muffle the sound. They were doing it badly. He stopped. He stepped into the clearing. He saw a small wooden farmhouse. He saw an old man with a straggly beard. He saw an old woman with kind, tired eyes. Between them, a young girl. The girl was beautiful in the way young people are when they have just realized something terrible. She held her hands very still. She knew the chopstick had floated downstream. She knew it might have been the last one. The old man saw the stranger first. He saw the bronze sword. He saw the salt-streaked beard. He didn't run. He had run out of running a long time ago. The old man said, very quietly, "We have rice. Whatever you came for, come in. We don't have anything left to lose tonight." Susanoo stepped inside. He set the sword down. He sat at the low hearth. The old man poured rice from a small clay pot. The old woman brought tea. The girl did not look up. He ate the rice. He drank the tea. He noticed nothing fancy on the walls. No paper offerings. No little shrine in the corner. Whatever they had once given thanks to had stopped answering. He set down his bowl. He looked at the 3 of them. He said, "I heard you crying through the trees."
Tell me.
It was not a request. It was not unkind. The old man drew a long breath. He spoke as if he had told this story to himself 100 nights, but never out loud to a stranger. The room got quieter than the river. "We had 8 daughters," the old man said. "Each one beautiful. Each one was the kindest thing in this house. The eldest came first. She was 15. A creature lives in the 8 valleys past our mountain. Its body covers 8 peaks. It has 8 heads. It comes out of the cedar dark once a year. And once a year we lose a daughter. 7 years, the old woman said. 7 daughters each year. We hear it begin to come down the slope. Each year, we walk the next girl out to the offering stone. This year, we have 1 left, the old man said. He looked at the girl between them. His eyes did not break. They had been broken 7 times. They didn't have it left to break again. Susanoo did not speak right away. He looked at the girl. He looked at her hands, white at the knuckles. He looked at the small straight back, trying not to tremble. He had broken his sister's house. He had broken his father's wishes. He had broken his own face, in a way, with grief. He had wanted to be needed and had only been feared. This was different. This was a household with 1 daughter left. This was an old man whose voice did not break, because it had nothing left in it to break. Susanoo could be useful here. "When does it come?" he asked. "Tomorrow night," the old man said. "We hear it on the ridge first. Then it crosses the river. Then it is here." Susanoo nodded slowly. "Then we have a day. That's enough." He looked at the daughter again. "What is your name?" The girl looked up for the first time. "Kushanada Haim," she said. The name meant rice paddy princess. The name of every harvest. The name of what feeds the village. Whatever the storm god had been before, he was something else now. He bowed his head. He had not bowed in a long time. He said, "If I save your daughter, give her to me as my wife. If I fail, you can give me to the serpent." The old man looked at his wife. The old woman looked at her daughter. The daughter looked at the storm god, who had not stopped bowing. She thought, "He has come a long way to be here." "Yes." The word landed soft. "Yes," the old woman said. The girl did not say anything, but she nodded once, very small. He saw it. He sat back. "Now," he said, "tell me everything you know about it. How it walks, how it drinks what it likes, what it doesn't. We don't have a temple, we have one day." The old man told him. The serpent loved sake. Every year, on its way to the offering stone, it stopped to drink at any vat it found left out for it. It drank until it could barely move. "Then we make it drink more than it has ever drunk," Susanoo said. 8 heads, 8 vats. 8 times stronger than the strongest sake in the province. Can we brew that? "We can," the old woman said. "We have the rice. We have the time. We don't have the vats. The vats we made were only ever big enough to feed a household." "Then we'll fell trees tonight," he said. "Cypress. The biggest on the slope. We'll hollow them by morning. 8 vats, head high. By tomorrow afternoon, we'll be brewing." They went out into the night. The young woman stayed at the hearth. The old man and the storm god walked up the slope behind the house. The cedars stood waiting. The first cypress shook. The second swing. The third. The smell of cypress wood opening in the cold filled the slope. Sap on the air. Resinous. The old man worked beside him. He hadn't worked like this in years. The storm god, when his hands were on a thing, was steady. The axe didn't waste a stroke. He had needed work like this for a long time. They felled 8 cypress before dawn. They hollowed them through the morning. By noon, 8 head, high vats stood in a clearing beside the house, their pale insides bright as new bone. The old woman and her daughter came out of the house with baskets of rice. The old woman taught the storm god her family's brewing trick. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He had not listened like that in a long time. They stoked fires beneath the vats. The rice mash bubbled. The smell of warm grain and yeast filled the clearing. By dusk the sake was strong. By midnight it was 8 times strong. Susanoo built the rest. He built bamboo fences around each vat, with a small gate for each of the serpent's heads. 8 gates, 8 fences, 8 vats. He left no head without its drink. He turned to the family, the old man, the old woman, the daughter. He said, "Now I want you safe. Not in the house. Inside something the serpent will not bother to look inside." He looked at the daughter. He said gently, "I am going to ask you to take a small shape for one night. Will you let me hide you?" She paused. Then she said,
"Wes."
He took a small wooden comb from his hair. He breathed on it once. He held it to her brow. The light around her thinned. The kimono dropped softly to the wood. The comb was warm in his palm. He tucked the comb into his own hair, above the right ear. He looked at the old couple. He said, "She'll be safe here. Stay inside. Bar the door. Don't look out, no matter what you hear." They went inside. They barred the door. The storm god turned back to the platform. The fires under the vats burned down. The sake stood ready, dark and gleaming. The wind shifted. The wind brought a sound, not loud yet. The slow drag of something enormous through cedar trees, 8 ridges away. The breath of something that didn't need to hurry. Susanoo loosened his sword in its scabbard. He waited. The wait was the worst part of any plan that involves a creature larger than a hill. He was good at waiting now. He had learned it on the cloud stare down. The trees on the far ridge moved. Not the way trees move in wind. The way trees move when something pushes them aside without noticing. A heavy quiet rolled down the slope ahead of it. Then a head broke the cedars. Then another. Then 6 more. The serpent did not climb a ridge. The ridge was the serpent. 8 heads weaving against the moon, cedar trees on its back. Susanoo did not move. The serpent's 8 heads turned in the air. They smelled the sake. They smelled it before they smelled the man on the platform. That was the plan. The plan was holding. 1 head dipped. Then another. Then the rest. 8 enormous mouths lowered into 8 cypress vats. Forked tongues found the sake. Throats began to work. The body relaxed across the slope. Susanoo watched the great body slacken. He counted. 3 vats drunk. 5, 7. The 8th head was the slowest. The 8th always is. He waited until that head also dipped. He did not draw the sword yet. He waited longer than the wait felt right. He waited until the great body sagged so heavily the whole slope groaned beneath it, until the eyes closed. Then he drew. The sword came out of the sharkskin scabbard, with the small dry sound of bronze leaving its sleep. He stepped down from the platform. He walked into the body of the serpent. He went to the first head. He took it cleanly at the base of the neck. The head fell into the vat it had been drinking from. The body did not stir. The eighth still slept. He moved to the second. The second neck was thicker than the first. He had to set his weight low. He cut. The head fell. The body still did not stir. He moved to the third. 3, 4, 5, 6. The slope ran dark. The smell on the wind was the smell every old soldier knows, and every village prays not to need. 7. The seventh head fell. He stopped. He breathed. He had been swinging without stopping for what felt like an hour. His arms were shaking. His shoulders were shaking. He looked at the eighth. He walked to the last head. The eighth was the largest. The eyes still closed. The throat still working slowly on the last of the sake. He raised the sword. He brought it down. The eighth head fell. The body convulsed. Cedar trees on the back snapped. The slope shook. Then, slowly, the serpent went still. He stood in the dark, breathing. It's worth pausing here. A thing the old tellers always slipped in. The number 8 in Japanese myth is not just a number. It is a way of saying many, a way of saying complete. When the old story says 8 valleys, 8 peaks, 8 heads, 8 tails, it doesn't mean exactly 8. It means a thing so vast you cannot count it. It means a thing larger than counting. That makes the serpent more frightening, in the old way of hearing the story. The thing he killed wasn't an animal. It was a sorrow that had grown into a country. And the 8 rings of fence around his bride later. Not exactly 8. Just enough. Just everything he could put between her and the world. Hold the number lightly. The point is the everything-ness of what he met, and what he made, and what he stayed for. Now back to the slope. The night is not over yet. He walked along the great body. He had to be sure. He counted ribs. He counted coils. 8 tails fanned out down the slope, each as long as a village street. He went to the first tail. He cut it open along its length. He found cedar splinters, river stone, old bone, nothing more. He moved to the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Each one he opened. Each one was full of nothing the world wanted back. He kept going. The 6th tail, the 7th. He was tired. He almost stopped, but the 8th tail had been the slowest to drink. The 8th, he thought, might be the slowest at everything. He set the sword to the 8th tail. He pressed. The blade slid in. The blade stopped, not on flesh, on something harder. He pressed again. The bronze edge nicked. Bronze does not nick on bone. Stay with this. The next thing he finds in the tail is the reason this story is still told 3,000 years later. Watch his hands. He set the broken sword down. He worked his fingers into the wound. He felt cold, smooth, hard. He pulled, slowly, carefully. He drew out a long, thin shape wrapped in old scales. He peeled the scales away. He saw a sword, not bronze. A blade he had no name for. Pale, almost cool to look at. Edged so finely the moonlight slid down it like water. It was a sword that had not been forged on earth. It had been there inside that creature for as long as there had been creatures. He understood without thinking. This sword was not his. Dawn began. Soft pink at the edge of the 8 valleys. The cedars on the dead body of the serpent caught the first warm light. He stood up. He turned toward the high heaven where his sister was. He held the pale sword up. He spoke to her, quietly, the way you speak to someone you cannot see anymore, but still hope is listening. This is yours, he said. I'm sending it up. A long thread of soft golden cloud reached down from the high realm. It wound around the pale blade. It lifted it slowly, into the warming sky. He watched until he could not see it anymore. That sword has a name in the high heaven. Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass cutter. The sword that one day belongs to an emperor. But that's a thread for another night. He turned back to the slope. He had a small comb still tucked above his right ear. He reached up. He took it down. He held it in both palms. He breathed on it once. The light around the comb thickened. The boxwood softened. The scale of it grew. He set it gently down on the dawn slope. The light cleared. She was kneeling there. She looked at the dead body of the serpent across the slope. She looked at the storm god's tired face. She did not weep. She didn't know yet whether she could. He did not pull her up. He waited. After a long moment, she put her hand in his. She stood. The sun cleared the ridge. The world went warm. The old man and the old woman came out of the farmhouse. They had heard the slope go still. They had not heard their daughter scream. They didn't quite trust the silence. They saw their daughter standing in the warming light. They saw the dark body of the serpent in the valley below. They saw the storm god holding her hand. The old woman sat down on the veranda. The old man lowered his head to the boards. The old woman covered her face. The daughter came up the slope in dawn light, with the storm god behind her. Nobody spoke for a long while. Then the old woman stood up. She walked down the steps. She took her daughter's face in both hands. She looked at her a long time. Then she said, "The fire is warm." Inside, the storm god sat at the hearth. The fire was warm. The rice was warm. The girl who had been a calm sat across from him. She did not look down anymore. She looked at him. He said, "I gave my word. If I saved you, you would be my wife. I will not hold you to that if you do not want it. Tell me. Speak the truth. The night is over." She thought a long while. She thought about the ridge. She thought about the 7 sisters who never came back. She thought about the man who had come down the mountain and listened. She said, "Finally, I will be your wife. But not because of your word. Because of who I saw last night when no one was watching how he worked." Maybe you've been seen like that, once. By someone who saw you when you weren't trying to be seen. It is the only kind of being seen that ever quite holds. He bowed his head. He said, "Then we will need a place. Not your father's house. A place built only for this. I'll make it. Take me to a meadow." The next morning they walked. The young woman led him along the bank of the High. They went past the wreck of the serpent. They climbed past the cedars. They came to a soft meadow with cherry trees at its edge. He stopped. He looked at the meadow. He looked at the cherry trees. He said, "Here." He took off his sword. He set it down. He picked up an axe. He started to build. He worked for days. The young woman cooked at a small hearth at the meadow's edge. She brought him water. She watched the palace come up out of the wood. She did not interrupt. A low palace rose. A curved tile roof, paper screens, a small inner hall. He looked at it. He thought of the night. He thought of the slope. He started building fences. He set one ring of fence around the palace. Then a second. Then a third. He didn't stop. He set 8 rings. He laid white pebble paths between them. He hung Shimenawa between the gateposts. He brought his bride inside. The cherry blossoms were falling on the Eightfold Fence. The afternoon was soft. She walked between the rings and into the small palace. She said, "Yes, this." That night, looking at his wife, looking at the rising clouds outside, he spoke a poem. The first poem in this language that ever held this shape, the first waka. "Eat clouds rise," he said. "In Izumo, 8-fold fence around my wife, 8-fold fence. That fence I make." It was not a great poem. It was a true one. The cherry petals fell on the wood. His wife sat beside him. She did not say anything for a while. Then she said very quietly, "It is enough." That was the answer he had been looking for, his whole strange life. Stay with this. Here is a moment most people miss. The trial is over. The serpent is dead. The bride is restored. But something inside the storm god is not yet finished. Watch his eyes. He looked at his bride sleeping. He looked at the rings of fence he had built. He thought about his sister in the high heaven, and the sword going up. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt that this was good. This was real. And underneath that, quiet, stubborn, old, He felt the pull of a place even his sister could not reach, the deep below, the root of the world. He was a storm god still. A storm god does not stay long inside a fence, even an eightfold one. He didn't tell his wife yet. He didn't even tell himself in words. But he heard the call. On a veranda. A bride asleep behind him. Cherry blossom on the wood. The great victory done. And, just past the 8 rings of fence, a new thing waiting. Morning came again. The cherry petals on the veranda were thicker. His wife came out of the small palace with 2 bowls of warm rice. He smiled. He did not mention the night. They lived. They did the thing newlyweds do. They made a small life. The garden. The hearth, the hours folding themselves around each other. Days became weeks, weeks became seasons. A child was born. Then another. The Izumo line, the old tellers say, traces back through them, and back through Susanoo, to the river at Tsukushi where the storm first came up. The old man and old woman moved into a small house at the 2nd ring of fence. They had grandchildren. They watched the storm god split firewood for them on cold mornings. They stopped looking surprised. Years passed quietly. He was a god of storms. He was also suddenly a husband, a father, a grandfather, a man who knew his wife's tea exactly the way she liked it. Both things were true at once. But the call from below did not stop. It did not get louder. It did not get softer. It just stayed. The way grief stays even after a happy life arrives. Not in the front room, in the basement. One night, decades in, he could not sleep. He sat on the veranda. The 8 rings of fence around him were old now. The cherry trees had grown thick. His wife slept inside, breath even. He thought of his mother. He thought of the river at Tsukushi, where he had been born already grieving. He thought of the path that goes down into the deep, where his mother had gone. The pull was strong tonight. He thought also of his sons and daughters. They were grown now. They had their own homes. The line was secure. The bride had not been alone in years. He had built her something that did not need him every minute. Stay with this. The next chapter of the storm god's life is the one most retellings cut. They want him to die a hero. He doesn't. He goes somewhere else. He goes deep. He didn't pack. He took only the bronze sword from the slope and the kimono he had worn the day of the wedding. He bowed to the doorway of the small palace. He didn't wake her. He turned, he walked. Maybe you've watched someone go quietly, not in anger, not in betrayal. Just because the place they came from is finally calling them louder than the place they built. His wife heard him go. She didn't sit up. She had known for a long time. She had been a calm in his hair once. She knew who she had married. She wept once, very softly into the pillow. Then she slept. He climbed the slope where the serpent had once lain. The body was long gone. The cedars had grown back. The 8 valleys were green again. He stood on the highest ridge. He turned south. He walked toward Yomi, but not Yomi. The old country at the root, not the land of the dead. The land beneath them. The deep cellar of the world. The kami of Japan call it Nino Katasukuni. The path went down through cedar, then through pine, then through bamboo, then through stone, then through dark. The storm god kept walking. Hours, days, he could not say. Time at the root of the world is not the same time. He came at last to a long underground hall. Cedar pillars rose into shadow. Amber oil lamps burned along the walls. The hall was empty. No subjects. No throne attendants. Just the low wooden throne. He understood. The hall had been waiting for him. He was the one it had been waiting for. He walked the length of the hall. He set the sword down beside the throne. He sat. The cedar pillars seemed to settle. The amber lamps brightened, just a little. He had come home in the strange way storm gods come home. Years passed in the underland. He grew older still. His beard went fully gray. The amber lamps went on burning. Sometimes a kami passed through. Sometimes a wandering god. He listened. He gave no advice and asked. A daughter came to live with him there. Suzeri Haim. She was not the daughter of his Izumo bride. She was a daughter of a different night, in the deep. After he came down, he raised her there himself. That part of the story will arrive at us with another god, another night. A young hero will come down looking for her. The storm god by then will be the test he must pass, but that is for another telling. For now, the storm god rules quietly. The world above does not know about the hall. The fields are watered. The rice ripens. The festivals turn through the year. The thunder comes. The thunder goes. But the thunder remembers him. The summer storm that breaks over a tile roof at midnight remembers him. The sudden gust that opens a paper screen and lifts the petals from a shrine remembers him. When a Japanese village hangs a Shimenawa rope over a doorway, that's part of him. When a town builds an offering stone at the edge of the rice paddies, that's part of him. He is in many small places now. He had been a god heaven could not keep. He had been a brother whose grief could not be quiet. He had been a husband, a father, a grandfather, a king, a storm. He had been many things. All of them in the end were one thing. A god who refused to pretend the grief was not there. Who broke walls. Who built fences. Who descended. Who stayed. That, the old tellers say, is what makes a god. Not the lightning. Not the sword. Not the 7 cuts on a serpent's neck. The staying. The settling. Even of a storm. The accepting of one's own place at the root. Above ground in Izumo, his bride lived a long, full life. She raised the children. She tended the small palace. She tied a fresh Shimenawa over the doorway every spring. She knew where he was. She didn't go down. She didn't need to. The storm she had married was settled at the root of the world now. And every spring, the cherry trees still bloomed for both of them. Long after Susanoo had settled in the underland, generations passed in Izumo. His sons grew old. His grandchildren grew old. The line carried on. The fences slowly weathered. The palace was rebuilt twice. A grandson of a grandson came at last to be a man worth telling about. His name was Tikunanushi, the great land master. He was kind. He was small in the eyes of his older brothers. He carried their bags. One day on the road, his brothers laughed at a wounded white hare beside the path. They told the hare to bathe in salt water. The salt burned the hare worse. The hare wept. They walked on. Tikunanushi came along behind. He saw the hare. He set down the bag. He told the hare to bathe in fresh river water and roll in the soft pollen of cattail flowers. The hare healed. The hare watched him a long time. That hare, the old tellers say, was a kami in disguise. The hare blessed him. The hare said, "You will marry a princess your brothers want. They will hate you for it. You will need to run." The blessing came true. The princess chose him. The brothers hated him. The brothers tried to kill him. Twice they nearly succeeded. Both times his mother put him back together. After the second time, his mother said, "You can't stay here. Your brothers will not stop. There is one place they will not follow. The deep below. Go down. Find the storm god. Throw yourself on his mercy." She gave him directions. The narrow path through the cedar. The descent. The bamboo. The stone. The dark. The hall. The throne. When you reach him, she said, "Do not lie. He has no patience for lying." He walked through cedar, then pine, then bamboo, then stone, then dark. He came at last to the long hall. Cedar pillars rising into shadow, amber oil lamps along the walls. A young woman in deep indigo silk was lighting one of the lamps. She straightened when she saw him. She had her father's dark, fierce eyes, but softer. The way moonlight is softer than lightning. Her name was Suzeri Heim. She was the storm god's daughter born in the underland. She had never seen a young man with the soft, kind face of a stranger before. She had never wanted to before. They didn't speak yet. They didn't need to. She walked the length of the hall. She stood beside her father's throne. The storm god raised his head. He had been waiting. "Come closer," the storm god said. The young man walked the long hall. The cedar pillars rose around him. The amber lamps flickered as he passed. He stopped before the throne. He bowed. The storm god said, "Tikunanushi." The young man said, "Tell me why you have come." The young man told him, "Brothers, the white hair, the escape, the princess." The storm god listened the whole way. He didn't interrupt. When the young man finished, the storm god said, "I will test you. If you fail, you stay here. If you pass, I will not be the one to tell you what comes next." The first test was a chamber full of snakes. The young man slept that night surrounded by them. Susanoo gave him a scarf. "Wave this when they come close," she said. "They will sleep when you wave it." The snakes came close. He waved the scarf. The snakes slept. He slept. In the morning he was alive. The storm god was not surprised. He nodded. He set the second test. The second test was a chamber of centipedes and wasps. Susanoo gave him another scarf. He waved it. They slept. He slept. He survived. The storm god raised an eyebrow. The third test was harder. The storm god shot a humming arrow far out into a wide field outside the underland. He told the young man, "Bring me back the arrow." The young man went. The brothers in spirit set fire to the field around him. The fire closed in on him. He could not see the arrow. He could not see his way out. He stood in the dark smoke. He felt something brush his foot, a small white hair. The hair said, "Stomp the ground." He stomped. The earth opened. He fell into a small underground hollow. The fire passed over him. The smoke cleared. He climbed out. The arrow lay nearby. He picked it up. He brought it back. He laid it at the foot of the throne. The storm god looked at the arrow. The storm god looked at the young man. The storm god raised both eyebrows for the first time in 100 years. The fourth test was a small thing. The storm god asked the young man to comb the storm god's gray hair, to pick the small biting things out of it. He sat. He turned his back. He waited. It was strange to put your hands in a god's hair. Strange to be that close. The young man worked carefully. He did not pull. The storm god began, very quietly, to fall asleep. This was the test. To see if the young man with the storm god asleep before him would simply leave. With Susanoo, with the great sword, with the harp, with the bow. The whole inheritance walked off in the dark. The young man knew the test the moment he saw the storm god's eyes close. He looked at Susanoo. She looked at him. Without a word, they decided. They were going. Carefully, slowly, he tied the storm god's loose gray hair to the cedar pillar behind them. One braid to one pillar, another braid to another. The storm god did not stir. He breathed deep. He slept on. He took the sword. He took the bow. He took the harp. Susanoo stepped onto his back. He carried her. They walked, very softly, down the long hall toward the entrance. He didn't breathe. At the threshold, the harp brushed against a stone column. The harp made a single soft sound. The smallest sound the harp had ever made. It was loud enough. The storm god woke. He stood. The braids of his hair pulled the cedar pillars from their footings. The hall shook. He stood there a moment, a god with his hair tying him to the world he had built. Then he laughed. It was not the laugh of the young god in heaven. That had been wrong-shaped. This was a laugh of an old man who had just been reminded what cleverness looks like. He looked toward the threshold. The young couple was gone. He walked to the threshold. He stood at the entrance. He looked up the long stone path that climbed back to the world above. He did not chase. He did not call them back. He raised his voice once kindly. "Take the sword. Take the harp. Take my daughter." He called up the path. "Build a great hall above ground. Rule kindly. The land will be yours. You passed." They didn't speak. Susanoo lifted one hand toward her father. He did not lift one back. He did not need to. He had given her away with a laugh. That was its own goodbye. The storm god turned. He walked back down the long hall. He sat back on the low wooden throne. He listened to the harp's last small note still ringing in the cedar. He smiled, very small, only once. Above ground, the young couple climbed out into morning. The cedar smelled fresh. The river ran below. Soft pink light caught the bow across the young man's back. They were alive. They were free. They had been given everything. They walked back to Izumo. Tikunonoshi built a great hall above ground, as the storm god had told him. He ruled the land kindly. He never beat his brothers. He simply outlived them, the way kindness often does. That hall is what we now call Izumo Taisha, one of the oldest shrines in Japan still standing. The storm god's son, in Law's house. The storm god's gift, in a way, to the world above. But that's mostly Chikanushi's story now. We will let him have it. We came tonight for the storm god. Let us come back to him. Let us sit one more time at his hall. It's worth pausing here. A thing the old tellers always slipped in. The story of Susanoo did not begin in a book. It began in voices around fires. People telling each other what the storm meant. 400 years after his bride's bride line, Japan finally wrote its myths down. The first book is called the Kojiki, the record of ancient matters. 8th century, a monk wrote down what the old reciters said. Before that, for centuries, the storm god lived in the air between people, grandmother to grandchild, fisherman to fisherman. The story shifted as it moved. Sometimes he was gentler, sometimes wilder, always there. There were other versions written down later. The Nyan Shoki, the local Izumo Fudoki. Each saw him a little differently. Each saw him as something a village needed. That is how a god, in this country, stays alive. That is why this story still has its hand on your shoulder tonight. Hundreds of voices across thousands of years, all decided to keep telling about a god who refused to pretend his grief was not there. Now back to the hall. Long after Chikanushi, the storm god stayed at the root of the world. He didn't rule there in the way kings rule. He sat. He listened. He let the work of the place happen around him. Sometimes, on summer nights, the lamps in the hall would shake softly. He would lift his head. He would smile very small. A storm above ground. The grandsons of his grandsons celebrating something, or grieving something. He did not feel the years. The years felt like one long evening to him. The amber lamps did not gutter. The cedar pillars did not crack. Time at the root of the world has a different shape. Above ground, more centuries passed. The court at Yamato rose. The Heian period began calligraphy. Paintings on silk. Poems written in characters his bride had loved. He did not see any of it. He felt all of it. Below ground, he listened. Each new poem touched the cedar pillars softly. Each new bride at her wedding tying a fresh shimenawa over a doorway sent a small warm thread down to him. He felt them all. They added up. Stay with this. The next part is small. The world above is darkening. A village is in trouble. The storm god, even at the root, hears it. It was a plague. The 8th century. The disease moved fast through Kyoto. People died in their beds. People died in their kitchens. People died in their offering halls. Whole streets emptied. The villagers did not know what to do. They had prayed at every shrine they had. The disease did not slow. An old man finally said, "Try the storm god, Susanoo. He has been quiet a long time.
Maybe he will hear us."
They built him a small shrine. They tied a great straw rope above its doors. They wrote his name on a wooden board. They asked the storm god to come up, to walk through the streets, to take the disease with him on the way. Down in the long hall, the storm god lifted his head fully. He stood. He had not stood in centuries. The cedar pillars did not move. The amber lamps brightened. He picked up the bronze sword. He walked toward the entrance. Long stone path. Bamboo. Pine. Cedar. Stone. Light. He came up out of the slope into a Kyoto morning he had never seen. Tile roofs. Paper lanterns. Cherry trees in bloom along a stone canal. The smell of disease. He walked the streets. He didn't speak to anyone. People did not see him clearly. They saw a tall man with a gray beard, an old sword across his back, a kind of weather around his shoulders. As he walked, the small dark fingers of the disease shrank back from him. They did not like the storm. They did not like the salt smell. They did not like the steady old grief. They went back into corners. He kept walking. He walked all the streets. He paused in front of every doorway with a paper sign of grief on it. He nodded once. He moved on. By the time the morning was full pink, the disease had left the city. He walked back up the slope. He went down through cedar, bamboo, stone dark. He came back to the long hall. He set the sword beside the throne. He sat. The lamps settled to their old steady amber. Up in Kyoto, the people did not know exactly what had happened. They knew the disease had stopped. They knew they had asked the storm god. They knew it had been him. They built a larger shrine. The shrine they built then is still there. It is called Yasaka Shrine. Vermilion lacquered wood. Pale stone lanterns. A great straw rope above the doorway. A storm god in residence, centuries of pilgrims. Each summer, the city held a festival to remember. Floats carved from cedar. Lanterns hung from every doorway. Music in the streets. A great procession asking the storm to come walk the streets again, just in case. That festival is the Giant Matsuri. It still happens, every July. For more than 1,000 summers now, the storm god in his hall at the root of the world lifts his head softly each year when it begins. He hears the music. He hears the wheels of the floats. He hears the low rolling of summer thunder over the city. He smiles, very small. He goes back to listening. The lamps settle. Later still, the medieval ages came. The samurai. The Mongol invasions on the southern coast. The great kamikaze winds that wrecked the foreign fleet. Old Japan said, very quietly, the storm god had answered another prayer. He did not always answer. He was not always there in the way people hoped. He was not a coin to drop into a slot. But sometimes he heard. Sometimes he stood. Sometimes he walked. For another 1,000 years, his bride above ground was remembered. Her hair was painted in scrolls. Her name appeared in poems. She was the gentle counter, weight to him. She held the harvest. She held the household. Their pairing, the storm and the rice paddy princess, became the shape of so many later stories. The wild and the steady. The grieving and the patient. The descending and the staying. Every generation finds it again. His sister, in the high heaven, kept the sun rising. His sword, the pale kusanagi, passed quietly down through emperors. The bronze mirror she had once held remained in a shrine at Eyes. 3 small things, 3 different places, linked. 3 sacred treasures, the mirror of the sun, the jewels, the pale sword, the imperial regalia of Japan to this day. 2 from his sister, 1 from him. The piece they didn't quite say out loud, kept as objects. That, in the end, is what the storm god gave the high heaven. Not lightning, not hammers on the high paddies. A pale sword sent up in soft golden cloud, with the words, "This is yours. I'm sending it up." Maybe you've sent up something like that, a small thing. An apology you couldn't say out loud. A gesture across years to someone who might or might not be listening. It is a kind of prayer, that gesture. The storm god in his hall is still doing it. Each summer the giant festival begins, the lamps in his hall brighten. He raises his head. He listens. He goes back to listening. He has been doing this for 1,000 years. He no longer storms. The kamikaze winds are old now. The great rains come on their own schedule. The thunder over the rice paddies is just thunder. The work of being a storm god has become, mostly, the work of listening. That is the small surprise of his story. The storm god is quiet now, not because he was tamed, not because he was beaten, because he was met by his bride, by his son-in-law, by his city. That is what most often quiets a storm in the world, not its silencing, its meeting. The thunder, when met, does not need to keep being loud. The sword, once received, does not need to be swung again. His bride above ground passed at last in great old age. The cherry trees were at bloom. The grandchildren stood around. She closed her eyes inside the small palace at the center of the 8 rings of fence. She did not weep. Down in the long hall, the storm god lifted his head once. The amber lamps flickered. Soft pink cherry blossom appeared, just for an instant, on the stone floor of his hall. Then it was gone. He understood. He sat back. He did not weep. He had wept enough for one immortal life. He bowed his head once, slowly in the soft amber light of the empty hall. Then he set his hands open on his knees again. He listened. It's worth pausing here. A thing you can do tomorrow if you'd like. Walk into a Japanese shrine. Almost any one. Look for a wooden plaque or a vermilion gate dedicated to a god named Gozu-ten. That god, in old Japan, was understood as another face of Susanoo, the protector against plague. The one the cities asked for when the disease moved. He has many names. He is underneath the same storm. There are around 3,000 shrines in Japan that hold him in some form. Yasaka in Kyoto, Susa in Izumo, Hikawa in Saitama, Kushida in Hakata. They are not noisy. They are not the famous tourist photos. But they are everywhere. Walk up to one. Look at the wooden offering box at the foot of the doorway. Look at the soft straw rope above. The storm god, somewhere far below, lifts his head when you stand there. Even if you don't pray. Even if you don't know why you stopped. That is the thing the storm god is, all the way down. He listens. He has not stopped listening for 2,500 years. Hold that close. Now back, one last time, to the hall. He sat in his hall through the rise of the samurai, through the unification of the islands, through the closed centuries, through the opening of ports, through the wars, through the recoveries. He sat, he listened. The lamps stayed warm. Earthquakes shook the islands. The earth above shrank and lifted. Pieces of the cedar canopy fell and grew back. Cities burned and rebuilt. He felt them all. He did not move. He did not get bored. He did not get lonely in the way mortals would. He had work. He had the business of being a place at the root. The lamps, the pillars, the throne, the listening. Sometimes a young god from the high heaven would come to ask him something. He would listen. He would say very little. Sometimes a kami of a small forest would come to thank him for an old kindness. He would nod. They would go. Once, on a quiet afternoon, a small white hair slipped into the hall and curled at the foot of his throne. The storm god looked down. The hair looked up. Neither said anything. They listened together for a while. That is the part of the story you only hear in some tellings. The hair from his grandson T. Kinanushi's road came down once to thank the grandfather of the kindness. He did not need to. He did anyway. That is one of the lessons the storm god learned only after he had stopped storming. That the smallest creatures often do the most thanking. That the smallest gestures often arrive last and carry the most. Those small thanks added up. Every shimano a rope tied at a doorway. Every offering coin in a wooden box. Every chopstick laid down respectfully on a table at the edge of a meal. They reached him. They keep reaching him. That is how a storm god, settled at the root of the world, gets fed. Not by sacrifice, not by terror. By the small steady manners of everyone who passes a shrine and bows their head, even quickly, on a busy street. He has been fed by the small bow for 2,500 years. He is not hungry. He is not tired. He is not lonely. He is, the old tellers say, peaceful. Stay with this. The last image of him in the old story is small. He sits. The cedar pillars rise around him. The amber lamps burn. The hall is quiet. He smiles. The world above goes on its way. Listen. Above ground, somewhere in Japan tonight, a thunder rolls softly across summer rice. Somewhere a paper screen lifts in a sudden warm wind. Somewhere a cherry petal falls onto the stone of a shrine he has been listening from since before any of us. Somewhere, an old grandmother is telling a child the story of a wolf, not Susanoo, but a different myth altogether. And the child is listening with her chin in her hands, the way you might be listening now. Somewhere, a person tonight is carrying a grief no one has asked about today. Somewhere the wind tonight is rising softly outside their window. The storm god hears them too. He is fed by their not breaking. That is what the storm god ended up being, in the last accounting. Not the swing of the sword. Not the 8 cuts on the serpent. The keeping company with grief. The being a witness who does not turn away. Old, peaceful, on a low wooden throne. Cedar around him. Amber lamps steady. The world above quietly fed by his quiet. The story of his rampage finally, fully finished. So what is this story really about? Not the cuts. Not the sake. The grief that grows so big it covers 8 valleys. And the small chopstick that finds its way downstream. The serpent is the easy reading. A monster, a seasonal terror. The thing in the dark cedar that takes daughters. That is true. There is more. The 8 heads were 8 years of one family's grief. Each year a daughter. Each year the same long cry from the same farmhouse. Grief, when it isn't met, grows. That is why the storm god could fight it. He was not stronger. He was made of the same thing. He had carried his own grief until it covered him too. He recognized what he was looking at. That is one of the lessons in the story. To meet a thing this big, you sometimes need someone who has been in the same shape, someone who has worn it themselves. Not a hero unmarked, a god marked. Maybe you've been someone like that for a friend. Someone who didn't fix the grief but knew the shape it had, sat with it, met it. That is its own kind of slaying. The chopstick is the second lesson. The story does not begin with thunder. It begins with one used wooden chopstick floating on a clear river, a small thing on the surface. The storm god stopped. He looked. He read the small thing on the water. He let it lead him upstream. Most great changes in life enter that way, not as thunder. As one small thing you almost overlooked, a short message, a passing remark, a used chopstick on the current of an ordinary day. Stop. Look, walk upstream. The 8 rings of fence are the third. The storm god, after the slaying, does not move on. He stops. He picks up an axe. He builds rings around what he has just protected. That is the test of every redemption story. The trial passed is the first half. The home built afterward is the second. Many redemptions in the world stop halfway. His did not. That is the small lesson the storm carried into his old age. To stay where you've protected. To live in the place you defended. Not to walk on. The 8 rings were not a wall against the world. They were a vow. Then there is the descent. The part most retellings cut. He goes underground. He does not die. He changes shape. He goes from storming the world to listening from the root of it. That is something the old tellers wanted you to keep. The end of a wild life is not always a fall. Sometimes it is a settling. A choosing of a place underground from which to listen. There is one more lesson. The number 8. Not exactly 8. The everything of a thing, the whole of it. The complete shape it takes when it has grown to its full size. The serpent had 8 heads because grief, fully grown, has all the heads it needs. The fence has 8 rings because love, fully built, makes all the rings it needs. Both numbers are the same number, in the old way of hearing. That is why the story matters even now. 8-headed griefs are still around. 8-ringed loves are still possible. The shapes have not changed. The work has not changed. Only the names of the people doing the work. That is the storm god's small gift to anyone listening tonight. The reminder that grief gets met, sometimes, by another grief. That a chopstick on a river is sometimes a beginning. That a fence built around what you've protected is its own quiet prayer. That a settling at the root of your own life is not a failure. It is a kind of completion. Hold those small things close, if you would like. The chopstick, the fence, the throne in the deep cedar. Now we will draw close to closing. The night is far along. The story did not stop in the old books. It moved into the world. 3,000 shrines across Japan still hold him. Many of them in cities you have never heard of. Yasaka Shrine in Kyoto carries his name still. The Giant Matsuri festival has been held in his honor for more than 1,000 summers. The wooden floats are still carved. The lanterns still hang. The pale sword from the 8th tale, Kusanagi no Tsurugi, became one of the 3 sacred treasures of the imperial line. It has not been seen in centuries. It is still somewhere kept. His sister's bronze mirror became the 2nd treasure. His Magatama jewels became the 3rd. 3 small things from one strange morning in Sakushi. Still the symbols of the country, 2,500 years later. His name appears in modern places too. Anime characters, train station signs. A famous warship from the last century carried his name. The storm god stays useful in unexpected ways. Storm gods turn up in many cultures. Thor in the north, Indra in India, set in Old Egypt. Each has a slightly different shape. Each carries a similar weight. The world has needed this kind of god more than once. Susanoo is one of the older ones still being honored every year. That, the old tellers might say, is because he settled. He met his grief. He accepted his place. Not many storm gods do. His shrine in Izumo is still cared for. Pilgrims come every year. Some leave a chopstick at the river. Some tie a fresh Shimenawa rope at a doorway. Each gesture is small. Each one reaches him. That is what a legacy can look like. Not statues in capital cities. Not coins on a throne. A chopstick on a river. A rope at a doorway. A bow without slowing on a busy street. That is enough about what came after. Tonight we are not at a shrine. We are here with you, listening softly. The storm has passed. The cedar is quiet. The world is gathering itself toward sleep. The wind has gone soft. The thunder is far off now. The cherry blossoms are settling on the wood. The river is quiet. The willows are still. The pale stones have cooled. The valley is breathing softly. Next time, somewhere colder, older. A different kind of fire. There's another story waiting. It begins in a colder dark. Tonight, just this. The storm has passed. The cedar is quiet. We'll be here when you're ready. Another night. Another story. The shrine at the corner is still lit. The lantern is still soft. The night is steady. Soft thunder very far off. Soft rain on a tile roof. The world is breathing. Sleep now. The storm god is listening. The cedar is patient. The cherry petals are settling. Good night. The morning is soft. We'll be here.